All right. Hi, I'm Emily. I am a rising senior. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a cognitive science major in Pauli Murray College, and I'm also an academic strategies mentor.
Hey everybody, I'm Audrey. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a rising junior in Brantford College, majoring in neuroscience, and I'm also an academic strategies peer mentor.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk with you a little bit about STEM PSETs, what they are, how to prepare for them, and how to get help with them. So I think just to start out, number one, when we say STEM PSETs, we're talking about STEM problem sets, so typical STEM homeworks that you might have. So just at a baseline, we want to ask, what is a STEM PSET? And Audrey, what are some of the key characteristics of PSETs?
Yeah, well, I mean, first they develop your conceptual understanding of the problem. Like, for example, answers aren't going to be like multiple choice. They're not going to be black and white, and they'll require some thinking on your part.
Yeah, and with that, they also require generally careful step-by-step presentations of your logic and thinking as you're working toward the solution. So it's not necessarily just writing out the answer to the problem, but writing each step and showing your work of how you got there to demonstrate your understanding of the solution itself.
Yeah, they also synthesize multiple concepts or procedures in a single problem. A lot of procedures that you might have already learned from past lectures, but now you have to bring them all together by yourself.
Yeah, and so with that, they're also applying what you've learned in class to new problems. So like Audrey mentioned, you're taking the concepts that you're learning in class and you're applying them to new and novel situations to really demonstrate your understanding.
Yeah, and with that application, you're basically reinforcing and extending knowledge that you learned in lecture.
Yeah. So now that we've covered the basics of what STEM PSETs are and what they kind of look like and what they accomplish, I think one of the big things to talk about is also scheduling PSETs and actually doing PSETs. So many STEM and QR or quantitative reasoning classes, like I mentioned earlier, will assign weekly PSETs, while some courses may have 7 to 10 spread over the course of the semester. So those might be due a little bit more infrequently or not necessarily as on it as consistent of a basis as ones that are due, for example, every Thursday or every Friday. And so for your classes that do have weekly PSETs, it's a really good idea to just begin with a baseline of allocating anywhere from 3 to 8 hours roughly to work on them each week. And so this will vary a lot from class to class. And after you complete the first few assignments, you'll get a better idea of how long the assignment will roughly take each week, and then you can schedule your time appropriately. And I also recognize that, at least for me, that was a lot longer that I had to learn to allocate towards my PSETs than I did necessarily in high school for similar types of courses. So it's certainly something that you'll adjust to. But at the beginning of the semester, it can be really helpful to just read your syllabus carefully for like PSET deadlines and adding those to your calendar, especially for classes without a consistent due date each week, because it can be kind of tricky to remember if you have a PSET due for one class on a Wednesday and then a couple weeks later on a Thursday and vice versa. So keeping track of them and keeping on top of them is a really important component of just making sure that you're able to allocate enough time and not necessarily cramming the night before a PSET is due.
Mm-hmm. And personally, something that I've found very helpful to prevent me from doing that, from cramming before a PSET is due, or just basically getting through a really difficult PSET, are office hours and tutoring. Everybody uses them, so you shouldn't be afraid to go to them and ask questions for help when you need it. So there's peer tutoring available, and personally I've used these the most for most, if not all, of my STEM PSETs. not only do you get to know the peer tutors even more, and they're often like grad students or fellow undergrads like you also get to know fellow classmates taking the same class, asking the same questions. And that's how I really formed most of my study groups and a lot of my friends as well. And I found that I was most comfortable asking for help from someone who is also a student like me. They just seem much more approachable that way. And I felt comfortable in that sort of environment where everyone else was just as confused as me, or at like I said before, asking the same questions as me. Especially since more people are probably more inclined to ask more questions in like a smaller room, and where the peer tutors will know how to break down concepts even more. And yeah, Emily, do you have any experience with peer tutoring?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of one class in particular that I took that I used peer tutoring a lot for. And that was my linear algebra class I took my sophomore year. And I really like how you mentioned like how peer tutoring can be a really great space to ask questions that you might not necessarily feel comfortable asking in lecture or in class or even in professors' office hours. And so for this linear algebra class, it was definitely one that I struggled with in the beginning quite a bit. And so I think my office or my peer tutor office hours were like 7 to 11 on Sunday nights, and again on like Wednesday or Thursday. So that chunk of time I would just block out to work on my PSET and ask questions those 2 times every week. And that really helped me, number one, like you said, like feel not as alone in the class. I remember being so confused about this one particular thing our professor glossed over on the first day, and then being like, oh my gosh, like everyone else seems to understand this, like I just don't get it and I'm not cut out for this class. And then as I started going to office hours more and like getting to know my classmates better, I learned that many of us didn't understand that one particular concept. And so for me, just kind of that moral support for the class in and of itself, I think was something that's really, really helped and was especially important that semester.
And I also found out too that like once I started going to peer tutor hours, that sort of moral support led me to finally take the leap and go to instructor's office hours as well. They're really intimidating to a lot of people since it's like just you and the professor sometimes, but actually a lot of professors are really disappointed that like basically no one goes to their office hours sometimes. And so I think a lot of people should just take advantage of that time to get to know the professor and show your interest in the class and see how might like hint at solving problems, because they're the ones who wrote the problem sets. So you'll get the perspective of the person who wrote the problem sets. And for me personally, I was afraid when I took like Math 116, the professor was really nice and approachable, but I was just like a first year. I was really scared. But after going to like almost all the peer tutor office hours, I just thought like, hey, maybe I should just get to know the professor more. And then after I went, I just kept going more and more. And I was like, wow, why didn't I just go in the first place? Because he's really friendly and nice. So yeah, just take that opportunity to get to know your professors.
Yeah. I definitely feel that, and especially my first year, I think struggled with the same thing in terms of just getting myself to go to office hours. And so another option, especially that's can be really important for STEM courses, is that if you are going to instructor office hours and you are going to those peer tutoring sessions that they're offered, and you're still having a hard time or feel like you would benefit from more one-on-one direct tutoring, there is individual tutoring available. And so there are also residential college tutors who you can just sign up and go to a time with them. But if you're particularly struggling in one class, you may be assigned or request to be assigned an individual tutor. And so, for example, for the calc-based math courses, that can happen. For example, if you maybe don't do so great on an exam or a PSET, And you can really just set up a time with a tutor to work more one-on-one on concepts and problems. And I've been a tutor for the past couple of years for Math 112. And I also received tutoring in another course during my first year. And it was really helpful in just building my confidence with the class backup, and really just getting to talk more through some of the bigger picture things going on. So they're like, all of this is to say that we know STEM PSETs can sometimes be intimidating and can be hard. And so we really encourage everyone to use these resources that we mentioned in terms of going to course-based tutoring, peer tutoring, instructor office hours, and not being afraid to reach out for individual help too. But you also have the option to reach out to academic strategies, and we can help you work through if it's issues with time management and blocking out time to work on your PSETs, or just general strategies that will help you succeed for those STEM PSETs in the best way and the best method possible. So we really encourage you to use all of these resources. And if you have more questions about what STEM PSETs look like or how to do well in them and succeed with them, you can always feel free to reach out to academic strategies. Awesome.